is sitting in the room next to the bed, so can you please move it?
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was wondering, like, wait, was there something to talk about before we started? I feel like
Not
there might have
really.
been, yeah. Okay,
Like
well, I
there's
mean,
stuff,
trigger warnings. Yeah,
but we can like wait until Wednesday to talk about whatever other random stuff. But
yeah.
um yeah, this week's episode has every trigger warning humanly possible,
Oh my gosh,
pretty
yeah.
much. Like like trauma having to do with like childbirth, blood,
Hmm.
incest, arranged marriage, rape, um, animal abuse, animal violence, everything in the world,
Yes.
um, all in like 3 chapters, and I like cannot believe like some of like the trigger warnings I see for people who read this book, and I'm like, what are you doing? There's
Yeah.
so many more than the ones that people usually think of. Like the ones having to do with things directly happening to Cersei. None of that happens to Cersei, but it's still happening in
Hmm.
these chapters, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have any kind of like weird trigger stuff with like pregnancy or blood, don't. Just
Yeah.
like skip to chapter 11, I guess, at least. But yeah, this one was I like took a break after reading every single chapter and was just like looking at the book like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like Jesus Christ.
Yeah. The story all of a sudden got so intense. And like, I mean, what's weird about it is, and I was thinking about how this is set up narratively, is because no one tells Cersei what's going on, like, and it feels more horrifying, I feel like. Because
Mhm.
the whole time I'm just like, tell her. Oh my gosh, can somebody tell her?
Yeah. And it's also just it's just a lot no matter what, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we start chapter 10. They actually arrive at Crete. And so she's taken to her sister, to Pasiphae, who is already in labor. Um, some of the things that she notices throughout, like I kind of noticed this chapter had a lot more of her noticing the mortal men behind her. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of notes about her noticing when they're struggling behind her in the stairs, and like how their eyes actually needed to adjust once they got into the palace because like it went from really light outside to dark.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I feel like she's setting up something here with giving us so much to build around what the differences between mortality and immortality are.
Mhm. And just her like separating herself, I guess, from normal people. I guess is the
Yeah.
best way to put it.
Um, One thing also that I thought was interesting is Pasiphae has a very dark palace. Like she's purposely shutting out her dad's light, and it's lit by torchlight for the most part. And that was pretty surprising because we did have this dynamic setup of Golden Child scapegoat. We'll get to like what ends up happening with them, but um this, Cersei's understanding was always, well, like, they're the favorite children. Like they were always loved more than me.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it right away, like to me, I was like, it's interesting that she's shutting out her dad's light too. But I mean, what can I say? Family dynamics. You grow up, sometimes you don't want your parents seeing you like that.
Well, and it's also just like a clue,
Hmm.
like that things are not like how she thinks they are. There's like 5 million of them, and she doesn't pick up on any of them. But that's like one is like the first one
Yeah.
that it's not how she thinks it is. Um, like if she's wanting to shut out her dad because she doesn't want him around, she's obviously not like the favorite one and doesn't actually isn't actually happy
Yeah.
because if she was, she would have no problem with him being around still.
Yeah. I mean, like, and it's such an interesting concept too of like they can't get away from their family at all when you think about it, because like if they just went out at nighttime when their dad is away, their aunt Celine is out, like there's no
Hmm.
escaping someone overwatching them.
No, there. That's just how it is. When
Hmm.
and I don't think there's any family that is as abusive as their parents are like shown to be.
Yeah.
That isn't like that. Like there's no escaping any of it. No matter who you are, especially when it's people you're related to because you look like them. Most of the time, you look like somebody. And so it's like that's literally your entire life. Like every single memory you have, everything about you, the way that you look, the way that you act, your DNA, like just normal things about you remind you of all of that stuff. And so that's just Madeline Miller putting that in her story in a different way, but that's what it's like all the time. You can't just like forget about it. It's your entire family. They're the reason why you're even alive. So
Yeah.
how are you gonna like escape them?
Yeah. So as they're getting up to Pasiphae's room, Daedalus starts saying, I'm sorry because last time that he really interacted with Cersei one on one, she snapped at him. And so he's like, look, I'm sorry, and I'm even sorrier for what you're gonna find inside. And that's the first time, literally, like a lot of my notes in the margins are tell her, oh my gosh, why is no one telling her? And like, this was the first one of like, okay, then tell her.
Yeah, they're definitely not telling her because they don't want her to like not want to do it.
Yeah,
They don't want to do it. And so they're like trying to make her do it without her even knowing what she's even doing.
yeah. Okay, so when they get inside, it says at the room center, Pasiphae lay upon the purple couch. One thing, like skipping to the bottom that I had, it says she was drawing all the light to herself, leeching the world around her pale as mushrooms. She had always been the most like our father. Now, I don't know. Part of like my whole golden child experience, I think, was reminding my mom of her dad. Like, I always joke like she says as a Christian she's like not allowed to believe astrology, but she would point out all the time that me and her dad are both Leos. Like, there has to be some personality similarities that she noticed early on. And that's probably part of like my brother probably looks more like my grandpa, to be honest, when I look at pictures. But I think personality wise I reminded her the most. And so I don't know, golden child stuff is weird because there's always like, what random reason is it that I was actually chosen?
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's never the same.
Mhm.
Like I look like my dad
Yeah.
more than my sister does. Um, so that doesn't really make that much of a difference, honestly.
Yeah, it really depends on the parent, I guess.
Hmm.
um so the first thing Cersei does when she walks through the door is she calls her out on the fact, like, because you had them sail around Scylla, there's 12 dead men. Like, how do you feel about that? And she's like, oh, whatever. I saved gold for them. Like, she put aside gold because she knew that was going to happen. But they have this really heated exchange where Pasiphae is assuming, like, you had to watch six of them die. And Cersei gets to tell her, like, no, I didn't have to watch anyone die. And, like, she had guessed that Cersei was going to try to change Scylla back and that it wouldn't work. And
Hmm.
that was also interesting to me in this whole exchange.
It makes more sense when she talks to her again later why she says it like that, but
Yeah.
hmm.
Yeah, like, I mean, sometimes the digs that you get in, like when you are in this heated dynamic with your sibling, are things that you're insecure about not having yourself.
Hmm.
And her siblings so pick up on how sensitive and empathetic she is and treat that as a bad thing. And that's why, like, I don't know, that's at the heart of this exchange, I think. Like, hating on her empathy, hating on her, like, her wanting to do the good thing.
Yeah, because in this world, it is a bad thing.
Hmm.
Like that's like the truth of it. It's like the world that they live in. You don't get ahead if you're nice to people. You
Yeah.
don't, and like you can see examples of it all the time. In the world that they live in, like the Greek mythology world, if you are nice to people, you don't get, like, the gods don't care about you just because you're nice. Like, and that's like an overall thing about the world that people don't like to admit, but it's absolutely true. Like, just because you are not a nice person and you're not mean to people or whatever, doesn't mean that you're going to get what you deserve in life. Like,
Yeah.
that is why people get so mad at child sex abuse victims for existing, is because we prove that that is not true. Like, the whole idea of like karma, oh, they'll get theirs one day. No, they won't. They usually don't. And so, like, if that's what you're expecting to happen, it's not going to happen. And, like, we are the most innocent victims you could possibly ever imagine. And that makes people mad all the time because we exist. And
Hmm.
so they don't want to believe what we say because then they have to acknowledge the fact that it doesn't matter if you're a good person, that bad things will still happen to you, and the person that does it will probably get away with it. And, like, you can get upset about that, but that's just reality. That's just how people are. And you should still be a good person anyway. Like, you shouldn't be a nice person just because you're going to get something out of it or something like that. But it is just true. And especially in this version of Greek mythology, like, anyone who is resembling something nice gets stomped all over.
Yeah.
And so it is like a weakness in this world for her to try to want to be nice to people and like want to feel bad and fix things with Scylla instead of just like, you know, refusing to like budge and like try to act like she's a big bad bitch or whatever, like most people in this world would try to do. It just is.
Yeah. So one thing I noted, like that she thinks while her sister's just laying there insulting her, is she thinks, but there was no wound she could give me that I had not already given myself. And I just put like that is a most relatable sentiment ever.
Hmm.
Like I feel like we've all been there where it's like we punish ourselves the worst for some of these things. So literally nothing that she has said so far about Scylla, about Cersei has been untrue. It's been things we've heard Cersei think about herself, just not put that way.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. So with with Pasiphae, another thing we kind of get the feeling that she doesn't give a fuck about family at all when they're talking about the men that died because of slipping past Scylla. And she says most of the families would rather have the gold than the people. And we know that this probably isn't true, that these people's families would rather have them alive. But at
Hmm.
the same time, this is her view of family because of how cutthroat it is.
Hmm. And probably people coming to them all the time asking them for help and things like that.
Hmm.
Coming from a family like that, that's what she would think is like, you come to me to need money, so that's what you would need more than like somebody else to take care of.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I was getting so frustrated at her because, like, clearly she wanted Cersei there for a reason. And, like, the whole time you're just sitting there insulting her. And it's like, okay, well, what is she here for? It just feels like, what is she here for? And
Hmm.
so, then we find out while she's been doing this, she's doing this after being in labor for days. And so it's also like, girlie, you're in a desperate situation. Can you just be nice for like 10 minutes?
Yep.
Yeah. And then we get confirmation of exactly what I thought, like, which was, why is she calling on Cersei? Cersei probably knows nothing about childbirth, and Cersei says, I knew little of childbirth. She hadn't even seen her mother give birth, so she just repeats information that she remembers hearing, which is like a birth positioning. She's like, have you tried getting on your knees? She's like, of course, it needs to be cut out. Um, and so they start talking about she wants surgery. She asks for Cersei to give her something for the pain. and specifically asks for willow bark. Now, this is a hint of something that Cersei finds out later, but Cersei corrects her and she's like, willow is for like headaches. It's not for you're about to have surgery. Like, that's not good enough pain relief, is basically what she's saying here. And like we find out Pasiphae is not really as versed in the herbs as Cersei is later.
Mhm.
Yeah, but this was our first hint. And Cersei just listens to her, gives her a bunch of willow, and then, that's what she takes before she has Daedalus start giving her a cesarean. Yeah. So this part was a little bit like, I don't know, because like I part of me gets the fascination. Like I feel like a lot of I don't know whether Madeline Miller is a mother or not. That would be a good question, but I feel like there are some people that get fascinated with the concept of birth. I did around the time that I was giving birth. Like that makes sense, I'm sure. Of like I wanted to look at every piece of information I could find. If you know my story at all, like I had a home birth, so I did like probably one of what people consider the most extreme versions. But I had a very positive experience, and so I like there are parts of it that are hard for me. Like cesareans are hard for me because that was a genuine fear when I was going to have William. Was like I'm going to have to get a surgery that is really hard to recover from, and like they basically cut you open super fast, but like the stitching you up is the part that I hear is the worst.
Mhm.
And it was the kind of thing I wanted to avoid at all costs. So I didn't feel like I was going to have that experience at the hospital, and that's why I ended up doing a home birth. But I think I just got incredibly lucky and had a very non-complicated birth.
Yeah. We talked about this, but yeah, it's literally just luck.
Yeah.
Like when I was born, I'm the oldest child. Um, when I was born, I came out somehow wrong, like backwards or something like that.
Hmm.
I was only 6 pounds. Like they almost wanted to keep me at the hospital for longer. And that was like my due date and everything. But when I came out, I broke my mom's tailbone.
Yeah.
And so like that just happened. Like that's not something you could like no amount of, doctors or people like that could have possibly like stopped that necessarily from happening that way. It just happened that way when I
Hmm.
came out. That didn't happen with my sister.
Yeah.
And my mom didn't realize that it was broken because she just thought that's how much it hurt to have a kid because
Yeah.
that was the first time she ever had a baby. And so, yeah, like it's honestly just like luck of the draw with like your body,
Hmm.
and what your body can handle and what it can't most of the time. But
Yeah.
I
I
will say
was
that this is,
22, so I mean, like, I feel like my chances were high there.
yeah, and my mom was 27 when she had me, but I don't know. I don't like pregnancy like that. I think birth is terrifying.
Yeah.
Like generally terrifying. I would never, even if in some like crazy universe I could get pregnant, I would be so terrified the entire time of what was going to happen when I gave birth that
Yeah.
I wouldn't even be able to handle it. Like when my sister was pregnant, I like me and her boyfriend both said that she wasn't allowed to like look at Reddit and like look things up because that's what she was scared of. She was absolutely terrified, especially of the epidural. She was terrified that they would do it wrong and then something bad would happen with her, like not like with her back or something. And so like she was so afraid of getting it and then somehow messing it up that she was in like more pain during like her labor than she needed to be because my niece came out like pretty quickly. She was only in labor for a couple hours at the hospital when she was already out. And so that happened a lot faster, and partly because, not because of that, but still, like, she was in more pain because she was so scared that they would mess it up that they had to, like, calm her down enough for them to even give it to her. And it's like, that's what I think about, like, childbirth stuff. I think it's terrifying. And so this chapter didn't help with that.
Yeah. Well, so Madeline, she's trying to put, like more lore into the Minotaur than is there because they don't really talk about how the Minotaur is born. They just talk about what it looked like after it was born.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I just always assumed that it was like it was just labor, that there wasn't that much to it. But Madeline makes this like Pasiphae was in labor for days, and then Daedalus needs to give her a cesarean, which is extra complicated because she is a demigod, or not because she is a
She's a
god.
god.
Yeah, she is like immortal, and so her skin is trying to heal at the same time he's trying to cut her open, and he has to really think about it. Um, and we find out here she intends Cersei for after. Now, we had speculated like, oh, Cersei's probably there because maybe she wants her to transfigure the baby so it doesn't look like a Minotaur. But it turns out like that really isn't that isn't possible, but we'll get there. So some details here that I thought were interesting is Cersei had talked before about how her own blood is just red, but we find out that Pasiphae's blood is red and gold, and so she kind of has a little bit more of that ichor than, more mortal looking blood.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so once Daedalus has cut her open, Pasiphae starts telling Cersei, like, I need you to be the one to reach in. And she's like, okay, what is in there? And Pasiphae is like, a baby. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, tell her. Like at some point
She
during
wouldn't
the
do it.
surgery, yeah,
She wouldn't have done it.
yeah. At some point during the surgery, even, she said, Daedalus, he knows why. Don't you, craftsman? Will you tell my sister now, or shall we let it be a surprise? So that, like, there was so many opportunities. And even there, to be like, it's not a normal baby, but yeah. So she reaches in. She was thinking, like, okay, if this is a normal baby, I know certain things, like I have to support its head and stuff. And so she goes in, she feels an arm, and then all of a sudden she feels pain. And it turns out little baby Minotaur is born biting her.
Mm-hmm.
And basically gets pulled out, like the metaphor that Madeline uses is fish on a hook. So she ends up yanking her arm out because she's in pain, and the baby comes with. And it's basically like bash baby on the floor and like try to get control again. Baby Minotaur takes out two of her fingers.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the craziest. Like, I don't know what I was expecting because, again, there's not a lot of detail. We know it's baby born with bull face. That's it. That's what the mythology gives us. It doesn't tell us, like, too much about its demeanor, even with this. So a lot of this took me by surprise, and it felt so, like, ugh. It was
Yeah.
shocking and gross the entire time.
Well, yeah, like I asked you, I read it first, and I asked you, like, how do you do a trigger warning for, like, an animal attack? Because that's basically what this is. And I'm like, that's not, no one talked about that.
Yeah.
And that's, like, I put, like, body horror, I think, on it, because it's kind of body horror-ish that she's talking about how she doesn't have three fingers, and that they're just gonna, like, grow back. And especially during this part when there's just like blood everywhere. Like she's
Yeah.
talking about how there's blood all over the floor from her, and there's blood all over the place where Pasiphae is sitting, and there's just more and more blood happening until her body starts healing itself. And I'm just like, this is fucking disgusting. Like generally like horrifying. What the fuck is wrong with people who read this book and they don't say anything about how gory this is? Like gory. I'm like, this is like a horror movie with like how much blood is all over the place, and especially how they like, I don't know how to feel about how she talks about like the Minotaur. That like bothers me throughout like the whole time that it's really around, about how they talk about it as if it's like this like monster that like is just wants to eat everybody. Like what like animals don't want to eat everyone to death, like just because they're
Well,
not
so
like
Madeline does.
constantly thinking about how to kill us so that they can eat us all or something. Like they're just animals. Like
I
what's
don't.
going on?
I don't think it is an assumption, though. I think Madeline was trying to say this version of the Minotaur is like hungry for flesh.
Yeah.
And
It's
yeah.
literally being a cannibal. It wants, because it's like, it doesn't want to eat, like, to be fair. Like, animals don't eat humans. They don't want to eat, like, our meat or whatever. We don't feed dogs, like, our own human flesh. We feed them, like, other meat and other things and other, like, vegetables or whatever that comes in their food. She made the Minotaur a cannibal where it doesn't want to, it's not that it's just hungry, it wants to eat human beings when it's half a human being.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why? Like, why? I don't know. Like, why to make it sound like a horror movie, like this thing coming out and immediately trying to eat her and then trying to eat everybody else, where they're like the most of like the next chapter is them trying to figure out a way to contain it before it eats everybody. And I'm just like what, this is not how I pictured the Minotaur at all. Um and I just don't know if there's like anything in Greek mythology that says that it was a like ravenous cannibal
I mean,
or not.
it's just kind of assumed if you're putting people in a dungeon maze thing that like you're sacrificing them to it, you have to assume that it wants to murder or eat, and that's why they're doing it.
I thought they just did it because it's disgusting and it like looking to them because it's like half human, half animal, and that it was and its birth was like a secret. And so I thought that they were trying to hide it because it's like a shameful secret that this thing happened and they don't want people to find out about it. And like almost like keep it a secret in a way of like this thing is like our secret weapon if anyone tries to hurt us. I didn't think they were like keeping it in the labyrinth because it was like trying to eat everybody.
Yeah, like I don't know. The implication is at least the seven or so it's seven boys, seven teenage boys and seven teenage girls that get sent to the labyrinth each year from Athens. And so yeah, the implication is they get murdered and or eaten. I so the eating part is not necessarily her invention, but the way she goes about it is horrifying.
Yeah. Either way, this scene was just like, what the hell? Like, this is so
Yeah.
much blood. Um, and just also the thing that we brought up before that after it's born and Cersei stops bleeding so much, and I forget what they do with it, but they do something with it so it stops trying to eat them for a second, and then Daedalus has like a chance to tell, quote unquote, tell her like what happened, but he's a little bitch, of course, as per usual, and so he doesn't want to like say, and Pasiphae's just like, I fucked the cow.
Mhm.
And we talked about like we were talking to each other before we did this about how like this book doesn't give them like the out, I guess, of being like having spells done on them basically by like the gods.
Mhm.
Like Cersei was when she originally went after Scylla, but in this one it's just her. And
Yeah.
in this for like you could honestly I think Pasiphae in this part it would be pretty easy to think that she could still be like enchanted or whatever by the
Mhm.
gods because it could very easily have done that, been that, like that one of them did some sort of enchantment on her to get back at her to make her like want to do this when otherwise she wouldn't because nobody talks like about her or to her in these chapters as if she's actually a human being, and so they wouldn't like realize if something was wrong with her or something in that way. And so it's you could like argue if you want to that she could still be enchanted in some way in these chapters to feel not only to have the baby but also to feel like the way she talks about it like it has to live, and
Mhm.
she's saying like it has to live, like it has to survive, don't kill it, don't hurt it, to the point that when it's like gone that they go over in like the ending of this section that she's like in mourning and stuff for it, like you could say that that's because she's like enchanted by it somehow or something. um but either way like they present it as if they're not.
Yeah.
And I think that this is just Madeline Miller is like very aggressive with like her overall like I guess themes is the way to put it. And so the overall theme of this book is definitely um that like women don't get like any like chances or second chances or anything at all in this world. And so them being enchanted would kind of be like almost like an out for them of like they're not actually responsible. It was actually something else that was hurting them. But in this version of the story, the only way I can like make sense of it so far at least is that Madeline Miller is making these things happen in front of Cersei to like make her like pull her head out of her ass about her own like internal misogyny, and just like presenting her with all these situations. And so she doesn't want to give them like a chance where you could say that like something else happened to them that wasn't their own responsibility, because then it's almost like then she might not realize one day or something. That's very obviously like the overall thing that she's doing here. And so she doesn't have them be enchanted, instead makes it like all of the women's fault in a way. They still get like way harsher punishment than anyone else does. But it's just kind of the idea that like Cersei was so desperate for companionship that she did that to Scylla to protect the one kind of companionship she had with somebody that didn't really even know her. And this whole thing with Pasiphae, that she would be more willing to do that than touch her husband because her husband is a fucking monster. And so it's like those are like the general themes that they're doing, but it does leave it where like they don't have any, there's no like other explanation, but they're just responsible for everything that happens. I don't know how to feel about it yet. It's just obviously something she's doing.
Yeah, so what ends up happening is Cersei is like, give me a knife. And so, yeah, as you said, Pasiphae ends up saying, don't hurt him, like he has to stay alive. And so they end up getting a bird cage to put the baby in. Yeah, that was a weird thing to picture, especially because there's still birds in it when they put him in there.
Rest in peace, birds.
Yep.
I
So,
thought it was I thought it was interesting that Minos like knew about it already.
mhm. So, um, let's see. So the next thing, Cersei ends up asking her sister, like, how did that thing come to be? And her sister doesn't want to answer. She says, you will tell me, or I will let you bleed yourself dry. And then she just prompts Daedalus to say it. So she doesn't even really actually tell her. But he takes responsibility. He says, I'm the reason the beast lives. And so he starts telling a story of how she wanted to get closer and closer to the cattle, and so he built a device. And then, like, when she was out there in the device, he's like creeping around it, and as he said, she's like, I fucked the cow. And then like literally says, I fucked the sacred bull, all right. um
Mm-hmm.
so then Cersei stitches her up, and let's see. So she says, the gods will punish you. But her sister says, don't you know the gods love their monsters? So, yeah, we get on this really weird, like, why the gods aren't mad at her. It comes down to they like monsters. They like the existence of monsters because the existence of monsters gives their children, the demigods, chances to be heroes.
Mm-hmm. And it also makes the normal people afraid,
Hmm.
which just makes them more dependent on them to fix the fear that they have in these monster things.
Yeah.
But that is what like every demigod does in the old stories,
Hmm.
is just go after something that's out there as a way to prove something or other. I'm not even sure why they do those things. They just do.
Yeah. So, after they kind of leave the bedchamber, Daedalus and Cersei talk to each other, and he thanks her once again. Like, and it's kind of she realizes that after scaring the shit out of him from yelling at him the first time he thanked her, that she doesn't want to do that again. So he's thanking her, saying, "It would have been me. I would have lost fingers if you hadn't have been here and pulled the baby out."
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Yeah, that would be a shame because yours don't grow back."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and let's see. So he asks her, "Can the creature be killed?" She replies, "It is a child of the white bull. It may be guarded by a god, or it may bring down a curse upon any who harm it. I need to think." So she's not sure what the fate of the baby needs to be either at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so she decides that she's gonna, let's see, she's she starts thinking to herself after Daedalus leaves, that, like, why was it me of all siblings that she called here? There was Percy's. She could have called him. And at this point, I was still like, maybe she wants her to transfigure the baby. So I was like, okay, but we know Percy's is skilled in necromancy from the sounds of it, because all we've heard is he's able to raise the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so his powers don't make sense here. Cersei's literally transfigured people here, so her powers do make sense, but that's not what ends up happening, which also just got to me. It feels
Mm-hmm.
like a weird setup. Let's see. So one thing that Cersei's thinking to herself is like, I can't leave this situation without doing something about this baby. She says, "I could not stand by while a horror was loosed upon the world." And I put in the margin, and Pasiphae knows it, because it is something that Pasiphae, like, even mentioned with Scylla. I think Pasiphae knows if there's any solution to whatever this child ends up becoming, my sister has it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's gonna not give up until she finds it.
Yeah, she'll figure something out.
Um, so this prompts Cersei to go to Pasiphae's craft room, is what she calls it. I thought that was cute, a witch's craft room.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she's never been in another witch's one, because, like, she they're the concept of witch, like, the first time anyone's really talking about this family. And so there really is only four, and she's never been to any of her siblings' houses before. Um, but she finds out something in this that I think gives her a little bit more confidence. And it's, she notices that all of the things in her sister's craft room are very rudimentary for doing witchcraft. It's like the simplest of, like, simple spells, basically, that she's equipped for. And so she says it was proof she was lazy, that some of the things that she has were old and weak dead leaves, that she didn't seem to care when she cut things, or what kind of knife she cuts them with, or what time of day, which Cersei had said on her own island she did experimenting to find out these things matter a lot. So we're getting the impression right away, and she says it herself in the next paragraph. My sister might be twice the goddess, but I was twice the witch.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the way that Pasiphae, like, I mean, we find out the way she used her power before Cersei came along, which is disgusting, but it, I don't know, it's not giving witchcraft in the way that we've seen it with Cersei. So I'm wondering if that's where Madeline's getting this from, is that, like, the powers she uses are so miraculous that it's not necessarily witchcraft, that it's goddess powers.
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah. Um, but in finding out that her sister just has the most rudimentary of herbs, she decides to go wandering around Crete, and she chooses to go wandering while she's still covered in, like, blood, just in general. Her own from losing her fingers, her sister's from the cesarean. She just, like, goes out amongst mortals who are like, what the fuck, as she's going by.
This is why people are afraid of the gods.
Yeah. Like, not even caring that she's scaring people. Um, So she decides she's going to go to Mount Dictee, and she says, no bears or wolves or lions dare tread there, only the sacred goats and their great horns curling like conch shells. Um, so it's rumored that Artemis roams the hills at nighttime and that Zeus was born and hidden from Kronos on this mountain. So that's the kind of power she's dealing with these herbs. Um, so she even says these herbs are so rare that few have been given names. Um, she ends up looking for one mostly for herself from the sounds of like what happens with it. It's Fur Dittany, the Queen of Healing, which she like says is super powerful and she's going to use to heal her fingers a little faster. Um, we also get like so I said in the beginning, her noting how like fatigued mortals were getting felt like it was really pointed. And we find out while she's on this little journey exploring this land that she's not getting tired at all as she's walking around these hills and mountains. Like she's basically hiking, probably in sandals, and is like not tired at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows her to do the type of work that she needs to. Um, So she eventually comes to some water and finally washes herself. And it says, I worked those small rites of purification which all gods know. And this, I think, is going to come into play later with Medea, if that ends up being a part of this novel. But if Medea ends up becoming a part of it, like, there, we then see Cersei deal with for the first time after this whole thing, after she purifies herself, is she's never tested her powers of prophecy. And so most naiads and nereids have some sort of like prophecy. They can usually see, like in stories, it's used all the time where there's randomly a nereid who knows what's going to happen. And so she starts trying to see what is going to be the future of this Minotaur. And she basically sees like going through the labyrinth. She says, a thread unwound through a stone passage. Creature roared, showing its unnatural teeth. It stood as tall as a man, a mortal, sword in hand, leapt from the shadows to strike it dead. So she is seeing the moment the Minotaur dies, and then when she reports back, she tells them like it's fully grown, so it has to get at least to adult size. Like this thing has to live for quite a while, it seems.
Yeah, it's not just gonna go away.
Yeah. Let's see. So she collects her herbs. She goes back to the palace, and then she sees a girl dancing, and we find out this is Ariadne, and she recognizes Ariadne from being basically the model from the statue that's like on the prow of the boat, and it's like a dancing statue. One thing that I didn't catch in their first description of the statue was like that it looked like it was literally moving. And like you probably know this because your mom just sent you a bunch of marble statues, but like part of the reason why when you look at some of those marble statues they kind of look like they have a like it goes in a circle upwards kind of look to them is to give them that feeling of motion. And so that's kind of what I'm picturing now when I think of that prow on the ship. Probably
Ariadne's
something
nice
to
at least.
Yeah. Yeah, so we find out she's super cute. She's like best friends with Daedalus. They have a secret knock when she goes to his lair. And like Cersei and her get along right away. I thought it was really cute.
It is.
So what happens when Cersei gets in and she talks to her is Ariadne right away is like, my parents are looking for you. And she's like, okay, but I need to talk to Daedalus. And she's like, all right, let me sneak you around because everybody's looking for you. And she takes her to Daedalus's lair. I mean, I love that she makes her very stealthy because she's trying to get away from all of this, but she's still sweet despite living in this household with these two people that are like described as really awful people.
Yeah, you can be nice if your parents are bad.
Yeah. Um, what's really cute too is when she gives her secret knock on Daedalus's door, he's like, "I can't play now, Ariadne." She's like, "No, I have Cersei with me." Yeah. So Cersei has a conversation with Daedalus and she tells him what she saw. She's like, "It craves flesh, as you saw. It's part of its nature. I cannot take away that hunger, but I may set bounds upon it." And he says, "Anything, I'm grateful." So what she says she can do is she can put a spell on it that for 3 seasons of the year, the spell will keep its appetite at bay, but every harvest it'll return and it must be fed. So this thing is only going to need to feed and be that like really scary beast thing for 1 season a year.
Made me wonder, like, what season?
Harvest season, so
What does that
Libra.
mean? The fall?
Yeah, fall.
Hmm.
I think Libra season with harvest, or is it? Would that be Virgo? No, Libra is the cardinal one for fall, I think.
It Libra's in part of September and October, so it would make
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So let's see. So the rest of time it would still be dangerous, but only as savage as a beast might be. So even when it is harvest season, she's saying it won't be as bad as it has been.
Hmm.
Um, Now, Ariadne starts speaking about the baby, and she is the only one that's kind of like treating this like it's literally a baby, you guys. Did we all
Yeah.
forget it's a baby? And so she's like, he's still my brother, even though Cersei has to explain to her, no, like it's your half brother. She's like, no, it's my brother.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
And she's the only one treating it like a living, like, thing instead of like a living, sentient being instead of everyone else. Treating it like I don't even know what, not like a living, breathing thing.
yeah. So we find out Pasiphae wants it killed for whatever reason. And like she thought that was what Cersei was going to do. But Cersei's like, no, I have to like I saw into its future and it lives to be quite big. And so that actually makes Pasiphae happy and she's like, a destiny. Oh, tell us what it is. Does it escape and eat someone we know? Getting a hint into their dynamic with the exchange that happens next, which is Minos and Pasiphae. We find out, as you said, Minos knew the whole time that this was not going to be his child, that, like, she had created what's essentially a monster. He knew it was going to happen. Um, so one thing that Pasiphae says to him is, "My husband maybe is a son of Zeus, but his flesh is thoroughly mortal. The truth is, I think he may be afraid of the creature." Um, yeah, I would be too.
Mm-hmm. And I think
Um,
he's also just disgusted by it, honestly.
yeah. So he yells at her. He's like, "She's threatening me openly now. Do you guys see what's happening?" What I underlined that he said was, "Your father gave her to me as if she were a treasure, but if you knew the things she has done to me." And he's talking about a spell that she puts on him. It's not revealed until chapter 12, and like this one's it's needlessly gross. I was hoping Madeline was going to avoid it. For some reason, I thought she would, and it's kind of like we got through the reading, and I was like, "Oh yeah, she did avoid it." And then I get to the very end, and it's like, "Oh shit, no, she didn't." Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the one instance of witchcraft that Pasiphae is noted for is that her way of preventing her husband from having bastard children with, like whoever, as was kind of normal for a king back then, unfortunately, was that she caused him to ejaculate creatures. And one work of source material is very specific and says scorpions, snakes, and millipedes, so things that are poisonous. which Madeline takes from this version.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would happen even with Pasiphae is part of the source material, but because she was immortal, she was the only one who wouldn't die. And the thing was, that effectively made Minos infertile, which is the only reason he seemed to be mad about it in source material. Like, that was what was weird to me. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I need to make children, so how do I make children? And what ends up happening is they use a sort of condom, I guess you could call it, that catches the scorpions and stuff, and then he goes to Pasiphae. And so then it's normal. But like they have to go through that kind of thing to have children, which is really risky for whoever he's with first. It's just really gross and disgusting to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and the other thing that we find out in this version in particular, they name 100 girls that this has happened to, at least. And it's all like servant girls or merchants or like, think underclassmen who, like, their fathers would be too scared to say no to the king. But how does that happen 100 times and like you don't see the pattern and you're still just like, oh, darn you, wife, and still keep going along with, like, how after some point aren't you like horribly traumatized by this happens every time?
Because you don't care about the women you're killing.
Exactly. And that's what that's what she's trying to get out about Minos, even though he's very much like he doesn't look good at this chapter. He looks like he's been basically like really beat down by Pasiphae, but at the same time she's giving notes of he's just as bad. It's really weird.
Yeah. For him.
He's never good in any mythology, which is why it's always so crazy that he gets to be the one who judges the dead to me. Like, I don't
Yeah.
even want to look into it effectively enough to figure out why that happened. It's just like,
I don't even
I
want
don't
to
really
know.
care about you, dude. But anyways, so yeah, and then Pasiphae's the one who says, as I said before, the gods love these beasts being born because then their heroes get a chance to win their reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cersei's realizing that her sister loves the idea that she gave birth to this horrible beast, that this thing that everybody is scared of. And so she's realizing it's effectively a trophy for her sister.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I really like completely trust how Cersei sees her sister.
Yeah,
But I will say
we'll
that
get there. Yeah,
at least part of this is also a thing of like, if your husband was like that, this is an obvious way to throw it in your face that you would literally rather be around animals than be around a monster that acts like an animal that's also human.
yeah,
And so that's how I took that as like, ew. Like, I'd rather be with a fucking cow than be with you because you're that disgusting.
yeah.
And that's what I like took that as her just like laughing about it in his face. And I don't care that she does that because he deserves it. The only thing in this scene I felt bad about really was that their daughter was there the whole time watching all of it, and that like Cersei would comment about how she would like just like freeze and like not move, and I was like, oh, I remember doing that.
Yeah,
And
sounds
so
similar.
that's what that stuff like I put child abuse as one of the things for Ariadne sitting there watching them scream at each other like that and having to like sit there and just not move because that's what you do. You just hope that you just stop moving and hoping that they forget that you're there so that you can leave without them directing any of that energy at you. And so that was the part that I, like, of course, noticed of, like, this poor little child that she's just, like, waiting and hoping that they don't remember that she's there.
Yeah. So yeah, Cersei's thinking to herself, now at any stroke, she made her fading star shine again by having the Minotaur. She made herself somebody who's important. Um, all the world will tell the story of the Queen of Crete, maker and mother of the great flesh-eating bull. Um, so Pasiphae then makes like one more quip. Um, hold on. Pasiphae says, "It took you so long to understand. Do you think they were dying from the pleasure of your exertions, from the sheer transported bliss? Believe me." Yeah, and then so that's where Cersei's just like, "Ariadne, it's time to go. Let's
Yeah.
get out of here."
I did love that Pasiphae was saying that, like, did you really think that you were so good at that you just, like, everyone died because of how amazing you were?
Yeah.
God, shut up.
I mean, I figured the whole like creatures coming out would be apparent or I don't know. Anyways, so her and Ariadne have a moment. She watches her dance, and I kind of loved this paragraph where she's seeing her practicing her dancing. She says, "This is how mortals found fame, I thought, through practice and diligence, tending their skills like gardens until they glowed beneath the sun. But gods are born of ichor and nectar, their excellences already bursting from their fingertips. So they find their fame by proving what they can mar, destroying cities, starting wars, breeding plagues and monsters. All that smoke and savor rising so delicately from our altars, leaves behind only ash." So this is how she's viewing everybody else in this moment because she's like, my sister just haphazardly created this monster, doesn't care what's going to happen. She's like, in this I hate my family moment, she's like, all gods care about is what they can destroy.
Yeah, and it's also just like that's what rich people do. Like, we're living in a world where techno billionaires are literally destroying the entire planet and life itself, um, because they can. And so that is something that happens. There's a level of, like, richness you get to where absolutely nothing that could ever happen to you would actually, like, affect you in any way because you have so much money that anything that happens that's bad, you can just find some way to get away from it. And so those people are just like literally destroying the entire planet every single day for like decades at this point. They've been doing that, but they don't care. And so they're doing that because they need to like prove that they're somehow still like the best because they've gotten everything their entire life. And so now they like name their companies after Lord of the Rings characters and like think that they're like above the human experience and they like some of the quotes from the billionaires right now are literally people saying that they think that if you have enough money you should be able to buy governments.
Ugh.
Like they literally said that word for word that they think they should be able to buy governments because they have money and they what their overall plan is for corporations to run the government. And so that's what those people are doing. And that's what, like, the gods are a version of that. Like, they just have everything, can do anything that they want. And so the only way that they find any excitement is by doing things to lesser beings as, like, a weird experiment to see, like, what we'll do when you do something horrible to us. Or to, like, cause horrible destruction in an attempt to, like, feel something.
Yeah,
There's a very obvious parallel there about who they're based on.
true. Um, so we she's still in Crete for this next chapter, and um, so let's see. We find out that Ariadne starts being separated from Cersei at the top of chapter 11. Pasiphae found out they had these moments together and tried to separate them, which broke my heart because, like, Cersei actually would have had a family member who cared about her
Hmm?
genuinely for once. Um, let's see. So she asks information, like from Daedalus, and says, what happened to the white bull after, like after everything. And they find out that the moment Pasiphae started showing she was pregnant, it just kind of disappeared. Um, let's see, he said, "Today I heard someone say that the monster is a gift from the gods to help us prosper," which that one took me by surprise. Like the way that he worded that for some
Mm-hmm.
reason.
That's what they would tell themselves.
Yeah. He said, well, yeah, it's not, it's people's words because he says they're not naturally fools. It's only when they are caught between two scorpions. And so Cersei says to him, Ariadne is different. And he says, yeah, she is. And I'm hoping she stays that way pretty much. Like
Mm-hmm.
he basically took her under his wing because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. He also lets her know in this conversation. Um, did you hear what they're calling that thing? The Minotaur. 10 ships go out with the announcement at noon, and 10 more will go out tomorrow. And Cersei says, "Clever, Minos claims it, and instead of being a cuckold, he shares in my sister's glory. He becomes the great king who begets monsters and names them after himself." Daedalus says, "Exactly." So we find out he built another cage. This one isn't a permanent cage, it's just a little bit stronger, and he says it's like a new type of metal. So we're supposed to be getting the impression, because he is known for being an architect and an inventor, that
Mm-hmm.
like he's he's definitely even inventing new materials here for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One thing that's interesting is Cersei hasn't been here that long. We have to think like days at this point, not months. And she says her that the Minotaur looks like if you lopped a steer's head and sewed it onto a toddler. So this thing has already grown from baby size to toddler size. It has kind of like an unnatural growth to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we also find that they've been feeding the baby prisoners at this point. That's what it's been eating.
That's fun.
Yeah. Um, let's see. So she goes near the cage and she starts saying a spell over the baby, and then she waits for a moment when it's lunging at her and throws a potion into its mouth, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And she says at that moment, like, she could see the change in its eyes, the fury in them ebbing away. And so she's able to actually go into the cage after this and handle it much like she's been handling the wild animals around her house.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, this is why I don't like how they treat it past this point.
yeah,
Because it's fine.
yeah.
It doesn't need to be locked up in a basement anymore. But they keep it down there anyway.
Yeah, and Ariadne is, again, the only person that gives it any sort of humanity, so, and she notes this, my brother Ariadne had called it, but this creature had not been made for any family. These are her own thoughts. It was my sister's triumph, her ambition made flesh, her whip to use against Minos. It thinks it would know no comrade, no lover, it would never see the sun, never take a free step. There was nothing it might ever have in the world but hatred and darkness and its teeth. And that's how she's describing it at this point, even when it's subdued enough for her to be able to go in there, despite the fact that seconds before she gave it whatever she gave it, it recognized her smell and wanted to eat her again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So Daedalus asks her, "Can the spell that's done on your son, or done on the Minotaur at this point, be undone?" And I think this is because he knows the character of Pasiphae and Minos well enough that he's like, I could see one of them wanting to turn it into super beast mode to like unleash it on people.
Mm-hmm.
But she tells him no, it can't be undone by another person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she never comes back here, so at this point, like, that means it's never going to be undone. So the Minotaur lives this way, we can presume, for the rest of its life. 3/4 of the year tame, 1/4 of the year hungry. Um, so we also find out that on the way home, Minos decides to be a cheap ass and doesn't want to send her home on like a specified ship. He basically is like, "You're gonna wait until I have someone going out that way."
Fine, bro.
Yeah. Um, let's see. So, her and Daedalus also start having a little situationship in this chapter, and it starts with them having dinner together. Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird that they keep putting her, like, she keeps going with these clever guys. I feel like she's jumping from air sign to air sign. Daedalus being the Aquarius, probably.
I don't even know what he is. I don't want him to be an Aquarius because that's what we are. But
Not,
um,
I mean, like, you have to admit, some Aquariuses, the God complex thing comes out in the worst way. Like, the head of American Apparel, Dove Charney, oh my gosh. He goes in between being friends with Kanye and telling him to shut the fuck up. And it's like,
yeah,
haven't we not?
I don't even know what to think about like Daedalus most of the time. He's just that person that's like, I'm really intelligent with science and nothing else.
Yeah.
That's basically him. Is he just I don't know. He thinks he's smart enough to have that applied to every other aspect of his life, but it doesn't. And he just like does stuff, and you're just like, why the hell did you do that for? And so her being around somebody like that, I'm like, oh, for God's sake. Like, of course you're gonna like romanticize this guy,
Yeah.
who acts like he is like somewhat, I guess, trapped, but also it's like also you could actually like
Hmm.
try to like get away, but he doesn't really try with like the same fervor that he does to like prove how smart he is.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I don't really feel that bad for you. I feel bad for your son. I
Yeah.
don't feel bad for you though, because you kind of ended up in this situation because you were wanting to like show off about how smart you are, and didn't like consider what that might do to people in power, and they might want to maybe somewhat control you when you do that kind of thing. Because he just is like, aren't I amazing though?
Yeah.
So like him, of course, like that's the person that Cersei gets every time they were talking. I was just like, oh my God, just like, why are you doing this? Like out of everybody in this in these chapters, why is he the one that you think is a nice person? That you like think positively about in any way after it's all over and stuff. I'm just like, oh God.
Yeah, so they're skipping a feast for the Minotaur where they're kind of like laughing with each other about, you know what they're saying about the Minotaur's birth? Apparently, he fell from a star. But then Icarus runs in, and I kind of. I don't hate what she's doing here with the nod to the mythology that we get later, because she does even mention it later. Um, but he's a toddler here, and or like later toddler. We're thinking like 4 years old. So he still has baby curls. He's got a cute little face, and he basically is like, "Say goodnight to me, Dad. I need my goodnight kiss." And it's really sweet. It's a really sweet moment. Um, she says, she asks Icarus, "Are you a good boy for your father?" And he said, "Oh yes." Daedalus laughs. "Don't believe a word. He looks as sweet as cream, but he does what he wants." And I think that's our nod to the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The boy smiled at his father. It was an old joke between them. Yeah. The way that comes about, it just like it's cute and sad at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Madeline Miller does have kids
Yeah.
because the whole like you have to say goodnight to me thing. I realize that she could pick that up from other things, but maybe she does have kids because that is something that kids do. Like when I'm at my niece's house and she's going to bed, she'll be laying in there and she'll be like, "Hug, Shannon, hug, Shannon, hug,"
Mhm.
and I have to go in there and give her like a couple hugs before she'll go to sleep. But she does it with like everybody who's there and be like, "Hug, hug, hug,"
Yeah.
before she'll go to bed. She does it when like when she takes a nap too,
Hmm.
and she'll like call for somebody and be like, "Hug first, hug," and she's 2,
Yeah.
so that's very much what kids do.
Yeah. So we find out that his mother passed at birth is the story that Madeline goes with. And I can't remember if that was the fate of the mother in source material also, but I do know the mother was basically another slave in Minos's kingdom that they gave to him. So yeah, it's
Yeah, I
not,
really didn't
yeah.
appreciate how he talked about her.
Yeah, so in this version, Madeline had it, it wasn't just a slave that he gave or that she had given to him. It's like one that she forced him to marry.
Yeah. And he was
Yeah,
just like, oh, she was there and she had this baby, I guess. And he, like, was just talking about her as, like, oh, I don't really care about her at all. And I was just like, what's, do you need therapy? Like, why are
yeah,
you talking about her like this? She's somebody that you knew that you had to have, like, literally watched her die, giving
yeah.
birth to your son. And you're just like, I don't really, whatever. I'm just like,
So this was also a weird thing to include in it. Every woman we pass, Icarus asks Daedalus, like, will you marry her? Are you gonna marry her? Which I don't know that that's a normal kid reaction. It's just, it's a really weird detail to give to Icarus.
I will say I've heard that with people who have kids whose parents die when they're really little, that they do want their parent to get married because they want to have like whatever parent isn't around.
Hmm.
And they'll kind of ask them like, are you gonna, like, because that's like one of those things that little kids learn, is like that's what parents are supposed, like adults do, is they get married because everyone's supposed to have a mom and a dad. And I have heard of that, like with like situations of like traumatic things happening where their parents, from watching like true crime stuff. And so that was like actually accurate because little kids do that. If you're like missing a parent, they'll just like keep asking you because they just keep thinking like, yeah, you're supposed to like, I'm supposed to have a mom and a dad. So like, when are you gonna do that?
Yeah, so, and this is where we get the weird detail of like, let's see, he doesn't want to marry again because he says Pasiphae has enough to scourge me with already, and I would have never married in the first place if she had not insisted. I know what an unfit husband I make, for I am happiest when my hands are busy at my work, and then I can come home late and filthy. And so Cersei's like, oh, we have a lot in common here. And that is kind of what Madeline tries to do with Daedalus. He's very much Cersei's what if because they are so similar. So they both feel responsible for creating a monster. I mean, Cersei's a little bit more directly responsible than
Mm-hmm.
Daedalus is because there were more than one participants in Daedalus's case, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't his choice in the same way. Like, yeah, it wouldn't have happened had he not been involved, but at the same time, I don't think he has responsibility for it in the same way Cersei does. Like him going with this narrative of I feel responsible for creating this monster almost feels strange to me. And I know that that's what Minos says in the mythology is why Minos is mad at him.
Yeah, I think he just, um, the way I like see Daedalus is like um, he's like he's like that person that is so interested in trying things that are new, but he doesn't think about like the moral implications of what he's doing. And so to me, I think of it as like, why would you make something like that?
Hmm.
He tries to say when he's trying to tell Cersei when the baby's just born, like, oh, I didn't think that it would be used for that, but it's like, what the fuck did you think she was going to use it for then?
Yeah.
And so like I think he's just, that's why I think he feels guilty, and I'm fine with him feeling guilty about that, is because he gets so like wanting to prove that he can make something that nobody else can make, and he doesn't think about whether he should.
Hmm.
And so he feels guilty because it's like, yeah, there's a very obvious reason to not do that, to not make that. And if he would have said no, like nobody else would have been able to do it. And like who knows, maybe she would have found a way for him to do it anyway. But it's more that she probably didn't have to try very hard to convince him to make it, because he would have wanted to do it to show how much smarter he is than everybody. Because that's just kind of how he is. And then think about later being like, huh, maybe I shouldn't have made that thing,
Yeah.
that did that. But now that I've realized that, I like can't go back and change it at all.
So yeah, we also find out like Cersei says that they're similar in this way, and she says that she doesn't think she'd be a fit wife. Apparently, the market for disgraced sorceresses is thin, and he says, "Your sister, I think, has helped poison that well." Which he's basically telling on her, like, your sister's been talking shit about you around the kingdom.
I, s- I took that a different way. I saw that as like him saying like his um Pasiphae is known as being a sorceress too,
Oh,
and
yeah.
people are afraid of her. And because of whatever she does with Minos or whatever. And so people have this scary idea of what a sorceress can do because of what she's like.
Yeah.
And maybe she was just talking shit about her, but I don't know. I just thought it was like the other thing that people are afraid of Pasiphae and she's related to her. So
Hmm.
that would make people afraid of her too, regardless of any other stories about her that's out there. I
Yeah,
mean, still it would be enough to make people afraid of her too.
true. So we also find out in this section Daedalus's plan for creating the labyrinth. So they made a point to talk about how Minos' symbol earlier is a labrys, which is a double-headed axe, and I didn't look up what the connection is etymology-wise, but I'm sure there's a connection between that and labyrinth. And but Daedalus, he explains it like a honeycomb, which like, okay, this isn't the only nod. There's another like knock you over the head. I'm a classicist. Here's my proof line that comes later. But this is one of them to me because bee metaphors are very favored in mythology, like or not mythology in like poetry for some reason.
Hmm.
I don't know why people were fascinated with bees and ant colonies back then, where like they were
Okay.
used for a lot of metaphors. So him saying, you see what a honeycomb the palace is beneath, like all of the storerooms and stuff, all of the hallways. He basically is like, I'm going to use that structure and create the labyrinth. So in this version, the labyrinth is literally underneath Minos' palace. I don't know if it's always beneath the palace or I mean, like, it's implied that there's no sun, so I guess it has to be underground. Or Daedalus says a line that Cersei brings up again later. Um, she says that Icarus is a happy child, and he's like, it's because he's too young to realize he's a prisoner here. And he says, a golden cage is still a cage. And that line really sticks with Cersei.
Hmm. It
Um,
still is.
yeah, she asks him where he would go if he escapes. He says Egypt. I find out they've been doing some pretty cool things over there. I mean, he's an architect. We know ancient Egypt had a lot of like cool architecture stuff, so
Hmm.
it makes sense that he would want to do that. Cersei at that moment thinks come to Aiea, but she doesn't say it out loud. She just says, "I hope you will get to Egypt one day."
Hmm.
Um, let's see. So she also like again she's kind of getting at Pasiphae in her brain at the start of the next section, which is she's keeping Daedalus as a trophy as well for her own vanity because Daedalus is such a prized inventor. I mean, he knows the dirty secret of how the Minotaur was made, and if they're going with this like he was a star story, I think that's part of it as well.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. She also says this one got me for a different reason. She noticed, or she's like thinking back and saying that her sister had pleasure on her face when she had ordered Daedalus to cut her open. And if Daedalus's wife died in childbirth, like that does seem like another cruel dig at him in the same way that having Cersei sailed by Scylla was.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. So then there's another Cersei and Pasiphae argument, and one of the things that Pasiphae says to Cersei is, "What a shame you can't use your new binding spell on Scylla. But of course, you would need her mother's blood. I don't think that Crataeis would oblige you." And Cersei thinks to herself, Pasiphae always knew where to aim the spear when she insulted her,
Yep.
essentially.
That's how siblings are.
Yeah. She says, I'm thinking of naming the baby Asterion. Do you like it? Starry one, it meant. The prettiest name for a cannibal I ever heard. And Pasiphae replies, don't be so dramatic. He can't be a cannibal. There's no other minotaurs to eat. I just thought it was silly. Like, it was a silly technicality. It's like, really? Okay.
That's the kind of stuff that makes me think that she is actually like enchanted or what have you.
Yeah.
Because yeah.
Then she says, do you think centaurs count? They must have some kinship, don't you think? Like, yeah, some of the stuff she says is so out of pocket in this next part of the argument. Um, so Cersei decides to confront her and ask her, why didn't you send for one of our other siblings? You don't even like me. Like, what was the point of bringing me here?
Mm-hmm.
And she says, um, let's see. She like makes a joke. Oh, we should keep talking all night. I'll braid your hair and we can laugh over suitors. I think Daedalus would have you in a minute. Like, essentially being like, let's have a sleepover and talk about it, sister. Why don't we? Um, yeah, and Cersei starts getting mad. I'm not your dog, Pasiphae, nor your bear to be baited. I came to your aid despite all our history, despite the men you sent to their deaths. I helped you with your monster. I have done work for you, and all you get back is mocking and contempt. For once in your twisting life, speak the truth. You brought me here to make me your fool. And Pasiphae says, I don't have to do that. You do that yourself. But it's funny that even after all this time, you still believe that you should be rewarded just because you have been obedient. Now that one struck a nerve with me. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so dysfunctional families and loyalty is a crazy thing.
I try to say about abusive people is that like they they don't think they're not like grateful or whatever for you doing things for them or helping them or whatever because they think you should do that anyway.
Yeah.
And so they're like, why would I be nicer to you just for just because you do things for me? You should do that for me regardless. Why would I give you something for what you should do anyway? They like generally don't get it. Like they don't understand why people do that kind of thing. They don't have that like I don't know, that like empathy or whatever. They just think people are supposed to do whatever I want anyway. And so why would I be overly grateful for you doing this when you should be doing it without me having to say anything? Like why would they think that if they're nice to people that people won't do those things for them anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's why they're like what they're like because they think that they have to do that stuff for you because if they're nice to you then you'll become too complacent and you won't do whatever they say anymore because they generally don't realize that other people like the feeling of helping people out when they need it because they don't feel that and so it just doesn't occur to them to think about it that way. But before you go into like this whole discussion, um, the reason why Pasiphae wanted Cersei to be there is because she wanted Cersei to be there. She
Yeah.
wanted her sister to be there. That's literally why. She wanted her sister to be there. And she is like making fun of herself almost by being like, oh, you do want to like braid my hair while we sit up all night talking? But that's legitimately why. She wanted her sister to be there. She was afraid to give birth to this thing. And so she wanted her sister to be there instead of one of her brothers. And like she doesn't want to admit that. But this whole time I've been like, yeah, that's why she asked. Or that's why she wanted Cersei to be here because she just wants you here.
Hmm.
Like when things between me and my sister were bad, like there were times when that kind of stuff would happen and
Yeah.
my mom would like tell me like she's upset or like angry or whatever right now because she's worried about you. She like doesn't want she's worried that something will happen to you or she's worried that if you're okay. And that's why she's reacting like this because she's worried about you, doesn't know what to say. And it's like, yeah, that was what was going on then. She didn't know how to express it at all in the same way that Pasiphae doesn't at the time, but that's what was going on.
Yeah.
Like that's what's happening here. They don't know how to like admit that they're vulnerable because they've learned that being vulnerable is dangerous. And so they can't just like tell you and so it comes out as like anger. But that's what's going on. She was scared and she wanted her sister to be there, but she can't actually like admit that. And Cersei is like too wrapped up in everything else that she can't like she doesn't even like kind of notice that because it doesn't occur to her. Everything her sister does, she thinks that she's doing there's always like a plot to it, and so she can't see it like consider like the obvious that like she was trying to give birth to something that she knew was really dangerous that wasn't coming out. And so she asked for her sister to be there because she wanted that comfort. And her brothers would never give her that kind of comfort.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
it?
yeah, it's a good point. And like I said, there's always an air of truth in some of these types of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so she says, um, well, she points out to Cersei, none shrank and simpered as you did, yet great Helios stepped on you all the faster because you were already crouched at his feet. So
Mm-hmm.
this is the first time anyone's had this conversation with Cersei of like, what did that all that loyalty get you? And I don't think Cersei's had to even confront it herself yet. Um, let's see. The other thing that got me that she says here, let me tell you the truth about Helios and all the rest. They do not care if you are good. They barely care if you are wicked. The only thing that makes them listen is power. It's not enough to be uncle's favorite, to please some god in his bed. It's not enough even to be beautiful, for when you go to them and kneel and say, I have been good, will you help me? They wrinkle their brows. Oh, sweetheart, it cannot be done. Oh, darling, you must learn to live with it. And have you asked Helios? You know nothing without his word. She spat on the floor. They take what they want, and in return they give you only your own shackles. 1,000 times I saw you squashed. I squashed you myself, and every time I thought that that is it, she's done. She'll cry herself into a stone, into some croaking bird. She'll leave us in good riddance. Yet always you came back the next day. They were all surprised when you showed yourself a witch, but I knew it all. I knew it long ago. Despite your wet mouse weeping, I saw how you would not be ground into the earth. You loathe them as I did. I think it's where our power comes from.
Yep.
So, this is something that I feel like it's hard for golden children to separate because we benefit from the way that the dynamic is. And if we just go along with it, like Pasiphae's even doing, even though she's having this conversation, like we stand to gain and be a little bit more free than our scapegoated counterparts are within the same system. So her saying the quiet parts out loud to me, it was just like so shocking for a second.
Mm-hmm. I will say that the parts of that I thought were most important was her mentioning sleeping with gods,
Hmm.
asking her dad for help, and then her dad telling her, I can't do anything to help you. You just need to learn to live with it.
Hmm.
I'm like, so that's her coming to her dad and being like, this god is raping me. And her dad to be like, I can't stop them, so just learn how to deal with it.
Yeah. Um, so let's see. If this is also, I said, why were you so savage to me? Aedes and I were alone. You might have been friends with us. And so Pasiphae says back, friends, she sneered. Her lips were a perfect blood red, the color all the other nymphs had to paint on. There were no friends in those halls, and Aedes has never liked a woman in his life. Um, she basically says he tolerated you because you praised him like crazy. Like he
Mm-hmm.
didn't actually like you. Um, and Cersei says you and Percy's were no different. She says you know nothing of Percy's. Do you know what I had to do to keep him happy? The things I had to do. And she doesn't really continue that thought. Cersei says I didn't want to hear more. Um, and yeah, I know you were very disappointed that this is where this discussion ends about what Percy's and Pasiphae may have, like,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I was disappointed by it because I don't need
Mhm.
her to say more.
Yeah.
I did like Google that and to see if there was anything in like Greek mythology or something about it, and there wasn't. There were many, many like book review posts that people made about Cersei being like, yeah, that's definitely incest is definitely being implied, but
Mm.
she doesn't like come out outright to say it, but she doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to. And the fact that like Cersei is like, I don't want to know more about this says like enough about it. She just doesn't want to think about it. But that's why I don't even know if I can think about Pasiphae as like a golden child necessarily because she
Mhm.
doesn't get anything from this system either. Cersei was just too wrapped up in what she was experiencing to realize
Yeah.
that like other people were being harmed the same way that she was. She had this idea that like because she's different from her other siblings and her mom doesn't like her, blah blah blah, that she's the only one being harmed this way, but she's not. Like her sister just told her that gods would sometimes sexually abuse her at the least, and she would go to her dad for help and he would do nothing and just tell her you just have to deal with it when she's like his prized whatever. No, she's obviously actually not because if she was he would have done something else, but it's not. They don't care. They like this entire like system is based off of like power moves. Her dad's not going to do anything against another god because that meant that god could then go after them, and so he doesn't care what happens to his daughter as long as nothing happens to him and his power. And that's what she's trying to say is like, did you really think that everything was great between me and our brother just because he was around all the time? Because it wasn't. And it just never occurred to Cersei that that could be possible, that her sister could be getting raped by her brother
Yeah.
as a because the men in this system have all of the power and the women don't have anything. And so it's not like she could have been able to stop him if that's what he wanted to do. Like sibling actually sibling there's a word like an acronym for it, but I can't remember what it is. I'll put it up on the screen when I'm editing this. But sibling like sexual abuse or child sexual abuse is actually a really common form of abuse. It's a lot more common than people like to talk about. Not in even just like sibling abuse in general, like physical abuse or whatever too. But it's more common actually to be abused by a sibling than it is to be abused by a parent. It's just the ones with the parent for whatever reason get more attention. I don't know. I think it's because there's like a weird stigma to talk about it when someone that was hurting you was also a kid yourself
Yeah.
instead of like somebody who is like much older than you or something like that, which is like the way that people imagine it to be. But either way, this is Cersei's sister telling her like, I thought that you would I was saying those mean things to you because I thought that you would like that would make you like realize what was actually going on. That in this place you can't like try to be friends. You can't be nice to people because as soon as you do that, they stomp all over you. They stomp
Yeah.
all over you even if you don't do that. Like they stomped all over her even though she wasn't acting that way. And so she was like mad at her, yeah, but it was because she was acting in a way that made her automatically be in danger all the time. And she was like, knew she was stronger than that because she was still there and putting up with it all and
Mm.
not leaving and not, and still like consistently trying every day when she didn't have to. She could have left, but she just didn't. And so her sister's basically telling her, like, I was never happy. I was going through really hard things too,
Mhm.
harder even than some of the things that you were going through at the time. You just had no idea because you always looked at me as like the villain basically because she had things directly around her that she didn't, and it just doesn't occur to Cersei still that like other women are harmed the exact same way that she is.
Yeah.
She's very like, I don't like the idea of like a victim complex or whatever. I hate it when people act like being a victim is like a bad thing. But Cersei really, really has
Yeah.
that in this book where she thinks that like it doesn't occur to her that any of the other women around her could be harmed by the patriarchal systems that she's being harmed by in the same way that she is. She thinks it's just her. Like she thought that about Scylla, and now she's thinking that in person about her sister. She was thinking that way about her sister when she was still on the island with Hermes.
Yeah.
Like there's a part in here where she's like, I don't think that Hermes went to visit Pasiphae anymore, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
but it's just like she like doesn't. Usually when you realize that like something, some system or whatever that you're in is hurting you, usually after some time you realize like pretty quickly, at least in my case it was pretty quickly after I went to therapy, like everybody was hurt by this thing too.
Hmm.
Like I realized that pretty like only a couple months into therapy. I was like, there's no way that my sister wasn't hurt by my dad too,
Yeah.
or my mom and everyone else that he was ever related to or had to interact with him. And even though I wasn't ready to like really think about that in a real way, I had to like take one thing at a time. I thought about that for like years, and I just knew that. And like when it you know that, it helps you like humanize, remember that they're people and that they do things not because they're just like evil, but because there's usually a reason. Because unless they're like, you know, another abuser or whatever, then less so. But these people are not necessarily like that. At least this sister in this sort of situation isn't necessarily like that. Like I always remember in like when was that? In like I don't know, 2021 or something like that. My sister and I would she would take me grocery shopping sometimes when my mom and I weren't talking because I don't have a car. And there was a time when we were at a grocery store and we were just like walking around shopping and stuff, and we saw the kind of candy that my dad loved, chocolate, and there's this
Yeah.
one brand of chocolate that he loved. I bought it for myself yesterday. I was eating some of it today because I've like basically forced myself, like I refuse to like let him take this from me because I actually really like this chocolate. But we were walking down like the candy aisle and she saw it and she was like, "Oh my God." And she like backed away from it and like put her hands up and was like, "Can we leave? Can we like go to another aisle?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I told her like I still buy it. I like basically forced myself to like I like made myself buy it so that I wouldn't so he wouldn't ruin it. But it's fine if like you don't want to be around it, that's okay. But like that she had that reaction to that. That kind of stuff happens all the time. Like around Memorial Day, we were at like a grocery store and there was like those my dad was obsessed with those not Duracell, that's a battery. They're these logs that like are supposed to be easier to like start fires with.
Okay.
And where you like there's like something on the outside of it and you start the fire from with it on it, and it's my dad was like weirdly obsessed with those. Those were like the only kind of like logs that he would buy, and he would always want us to go and buy them from the store. My mom saw them and like freaked out and like was literally having like PTSD and was
Oh
like,
my
"Can we
gosh.
leave?" And we're like, "Yep, we're leaving. Bye."
Yeah.
And because she was saying if we stay and like I look at this, I'm going to have like a panic attack. So it's like that's this part made me mad because we haven't even got to the part that made me mad, which is like Cersei's reaction to it for the rest of this chapter and the next one.
Yeah.
But I'm just to like talk about it in the moment. It made me really mad because this is her sister saying I was horribly abused by our dad. I was horribly abused by other people around us. I was horribly abused by my brother. And the person that I had to be around all the time was also horribly abusing me all the time. She's like trying to tell Cersei this stuff. She's trying to tell her like I was hard on you because I knew that they would like eat you up and spit you out basically. And I wanted you to stop. She's basically telling her in a roundabout way like I was mad at you because I wanted you to like be like almost like a teammate, you know?
Hmm.
And she wasn't. And like Cersei's reaction is just like she doesn't pick up on any of that. And
Yeah.
it's like I'm always going to be like just as like a general rule, I don't care who you are.
Hmm.
I'm always going to be really mad at you when somebody tells you that they are a victim of incest and you have no reaction besides
Yeah.
that you don't want to hear about it. Like she doesn't say that should shake you up. That should make you look at somebody very differently. Like
Yeah.
every
That was
person in my
literally
life when they
going
found that
on.
out,
Yeah.
they were like, what? They were like, "Oh my God, what?" And they would ask me like all kinds of questions about whatever. Like my sister did that too, and especially right after everything, like after I told them all. And so it's like that should make you like stop and
Yeah.
like have like a mental collapse the way that everyone in my family did when I told them. Um, you shouldn't just be able to be like anyway and just like move on from it. And I'm just like, oh God. Like she finally told you about that and your response is like, I think you're annoying.
Yeah.
Or just like not really seeing it. And I'm just I told you this and our friend Jean this, but I was so frustrated reading these chapters because I was just in my head. I was just screaming like, "Wake up! Wake up! What is going to make you wake up to what is going on around you? Your sister just told you that her brother would rape her, and they were always together all the time, so she would never get away from him. If that doesn't make you wake up and realize what's going on to women around you besides you, what is going to make you realize it? Are you
Yeah.
ever going to realize it?"
Well, and I do think that some people are that painfully dense that they need stuff to happen to them for them to have empathy. In a way, I do think that I was that kind of golden child that had I never gotten sick, would I have gotten better? Who knows? You know what I mean? Like, had I had not gotten chronically ill, and that humbled me in ways that I had never been humbled before. Like, would I still have gone to therapy and done this huge journey of self-discovery and wanting to be different? I don't know that it would be the same, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's Pasiphae, she also is in a golden cage here. This line
Yeah.
that Cersei grabs hold of, and to some extent Cersei realizes it. Like she realizes, oh, my dad married her off to a son of Zeus because he thought that would keep her contained, and in ways it does, but like she's also this person that I don't like.
Also, like,
And
fuck you
yeah,
that your daughter needs to be contained.
yeah. But let's see. So she's contained both in the marriage because Minos wants a submissive wife, and because of this pairing that was forced upon her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and part of the reason why they think this, why they're so happy that this pairing happened, is because Zeus is terrified of witchcraft and wanted a sacrifice. That's what she says to Cersei. You were the sacrifice, but like also look at everybody else. They're somehow under his thumb. It's something that Helios said they were making sure of after they discovered all these kids were witches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like, and honestly, when you think about it, like looking at how they all ended up kind of living, like
Hmm.
Cersei thinks that her being on this island and not being able to leave is like a horrible punishment, but honestly,
Yeah.
it's fine. Like she's not married to a fucking monster. Like I think it's during this part that Pasiphae says like, father told me that he would be too afraid of me to like try too many things, but that's not true. And
Hmm.
so now she's just like trapped with somebody like that and she
Yeah.
can't leave and she can't leave either. But she's trapped with somebody that's horrible, that's doing horrible things to her after other people did horrible things to her already. And if she leaves, that's like disobeying her dad and their entire family, and it would seem like an act of defiance towards Zeus. And
Yeah.
so she literally can't do anything. And the other like brothers are in places too, but they're always being watched, and they're always like under everybody's like kind of like surveillance, I guess.
Hmm.
They're all always watched. They're all separated from each other. They all like can't leave where they are because if they did, Zeus would be like suspicious of that. And so they're all separated. They're all on their own basically. So if anything goes wrong, there's nothing that any of them can really do too much about. At least for her, she's on her island and she can do whatever she wants all day.
Hmm.
Like she can, get better at spells and stuff because she has all this time. All she has is time. She doesn't have anything else to do, and so she can sit there and experiment with like plants and flowers and figure out how to be a better witch and have like familiar animals and have all these other animals that show up and take care of them and figure out how to interact with them because she doesn't have anything else to do. Like, there's nobody else there. She has no other responsibilities. The rest of them have other things that that they have to deal with. Um, she doesn't really have any of that stuff unless somebody comes to like visit her or something.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's just she actually gets like the best deal out of all of them, but she doesn't in that world where they're supposed to like succeed and be whatever successful in whatever way they imagine that to be. She's seen as like a failure, but that's just because that world sees success as like having lots of children and like doing things to like make the gods happy. And so she's not having children and she's not doing anything actively to make the gods happy. But overall with like any other place, you would look at her as like, yeah, she's doing good. She's
Yeah.
mostly happy. She's having like sex with somebody, but it's because she wants to.
Yeah.
Not because of any other reason. She doesn't have to like have babies or have anything like that going on. She can just do whatever she wants. None of her other siblings can do that.
Yeah.
They they can't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she carries out her little like friends with benefits situation with Daedalus after this. Like the first time that they actually actively mention they slept together is right after this. Um, which leads to another discussion about like, oh, we both created monsters again. Um, so she tells him that the Minotaur is going to be hungry for as many as 15 in a moon. Although the mythology is usually 14, seven boys, seven girls.
Mm-hmm.
And from what like the myths say, by the time Theseus got there, there had only been two rounds of these tributes, and they happen, depending on the version of the story, every 7 to 9 years. So the Minotaur was at most 18 at that
Mm-hmm.
point. Ariadne, already being a little girl, would probably put her, I don't know, maybe early to mid 20s, which is kind of old for her to still be unmarried. That's the only thing that, like, I think is an interesting choice here on Madeline's side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it would also make her older than Theseus. Yeah. Um, so he asks Cersei, "How do we bear it?" Meaning creating a monster that's going to take lives. And she thinks back to Prometheus's words and says, "The best we can." Basically, which is what Prometheus said, that like when she asked about mortals, he said, you know, mortals basically live these terrible lives and then they go to the afterlife where they can't really enjoy anything. And she had asked him as a kid, like, how do they bury it? And he said, best they can.
Mm-hmm.
So she's repeating that here. And it just like goes to show like Madeline's kind of beating us over the head with like the whole empathetic, like she's not like other goddesses, she's more like a mortal kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, she does get to leave on one of the ships, so she goes along with traders that are passing by Aiea. She doesn't really get to say goodbye to her sister. Ariadne is still being kept from her. But, oh no, she does get to say goodbye to Daedalus, though. Daedalus comes and he's like, I'm gonna get in trouble, but I don't care, kind of thing. And she's able to say goodbye to Ariadne through him, at least.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing that like ended the kind of conversation between her and Pasiphae is that Pasiphae Pasiphae was basically saying like you're not that different from me.
Hmm.
Um, and Cersei leaves the conversation just being mad about that,
Yeah.
like mad that Pasiphae thinks that they're in any way the same.
Hmm.
Um, they are.
Yeah.
Part of the whole like golden child scapegoat whatever thing is that you both feel the exact same thing. You just aren't aware when it's happening a lot of the time, that when it's really bad at least, that you are.
Hmm.
But you are. Like me
Yeah.
and my sister being adults was her basically coming to me and telling me that everything that I struggled with, she also struggled with too. She just didn't say it out loud.
Yeah.
And so it's like that is yeah. But she's so mad about that idea that she could be like her sister that she just I don't know. She just
Yeah.
that's what she gets out of it. She's just mad at Pasiphae for bringing that up basically. And then
Yeah.
is spends the rest of this next chapter trying to convince herself that she's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, Pasiphae did end their little discussion like yelling at her, "Get out!" But I don't think Pasiphae would have been unreceptive to like more discussion.
Yeah, and it's also like you just said all of that and you're not like, giving something back. Like get I would also be like, go away.
Yeah.
Like I just told you all of that stuff and your response is getting upset at me for anything. Or not wanting to like believe me. I'm not going to listen. Like
Yeah.
go somewhere else. I don't want to deal with that.
Um, let's see. So we she goes onto a ship. She we find out she's given a few things, some presents from Daedalus mostly, although I would have to imagine she was at least paid a little bit by the king and queen for being there. Um, but what she gets is, it says, inside one of the crates was undyed wools and yarns and flax of every kind. In the other, the most beautiful loom I had ever seen made from polished cedar. Um, and okay, here's the part where Madeline beats you over the head with, "I am a classicist, here's how you know."
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have it still. It stands near my hearth and has even found its way into the songs. Perhaps that is no surprise. Poets like such symmetries. Which Circe skilled at spinning spells and threads alike at weaving charms and cloths? Who am I to spoil an easy hexameter? So, dactylic hexameter is what the Odyssey is written in, the pattern that the Odyssey is written in. So, who am I to spoil an easy hexameter? Plus, her saying, like, this loom has made its way into songs. When the men walk up on Circe's palace in the Odyssey, she's singing at her loom.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yeah, she's like, I've read the Odyssey. See, look, I've read the Odyssey.
Like we get it, ma'am.
Yes. You have to cash in that classics degree every once in a while, or it just doesn't feel worth it. um, let's see. She gets back to her island, and like they kind of pass through like the mortal generations very fast after that. So she gets back to her island, and on when Circe, or not when Circe, when Hermes visits her again, she finds out that Icarus didn't escape their move for freedom, the whole thing with the wax wings. Um, so she finds out that story. She
Mm-hmm.
says, "I mourned for that sweet boy's death, but I mourned more for Daedalus, winging doggedly onwards, dragging that desperate grief behind him." So she knows, like, due to Daedalus's character, it's not like he was gonna just let himself fall into the ocean too out of sadness. He
Mm-hmm.
had to keep going despite the fact that his greatest treasure just like died.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. Daedalus did not long outlive his son. His limbs turned gray, and nevertheless, all his strength was transmuted into smoke. I had no right to claim him, I knew it, but in a solitary life, there are rare moments when another soul dips near yours, as stars once a year brush the earth. Such a constellation was he to me. Um, so I don't know, like the way that Daedalus and Circe describe themselves, if it's supposed to give a romantic or not, because in a way this is giving a tiny bit of romance. Like she liked the idea of it, even if she didn't want it necessarily. I don't know.
I mean, like she definitely wants one. Like this version of Cersei with how she was with like Glaucus and stuff. I think she definitely wants one. I don't know what a romanticism is. I really have no idea. Like that's the most confusing thing to ever figure out. Like what is romantic attraction or not? Um, Even aromantic people are like confused by the concept.
Yeah.
It's just hard to define or like figure out what you could have and what you don't. I'm honestly not sure. But I will just say that I think that she does want want that, but Daedalus isn't like literally said like I wouldn't be a good partner, and so maybe he would have been with her because she doesn't want him to be around all the time anyway. But I don't know that it's that she doesn't want a relationship or that she just doesn't knows that he doesn't want one necessarily the same way or something. I don't know. It's hard to really say that because she hasn't really fully tried to have one in it all, and so it's hard to say whether she really wants one or not. With considering that, it's hard to like make that judgment at this point.
Yeah. So chapter 12 opens, we find out they didn't go past Scylla on the way back, so she doesn't have to face Scylla again. Right away, that brings up Aeneas because Aeneas is the hero where it's just like told in his instructions, like if you sail around Sicily, it takes a few more days, but then you don't have to go near Scylla and Charybdis.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about this in one of my videos about them. Like the Romans are just more obsessed with things existing in Rome or around Rome. And so that's why they have a pinpoint of Scylla and Charybdis are here, and they can look at a map and be like, okay, so we're just not gonna go this direction.
Make Rome great again.
Pretty much. Let's see. So when she gets back, she starts planting some of the herbs that she had gathered while she was in Crete on Mount Dicte. She notes that their hum seemed fader, their colors faded. So the herbs don't work as well when they're not in their place. I don't know. I like magic systems, so I'm really trying to figure out this one of like how does her witchcraft work and what the limitations and stuff are of it. So it's kind of interesting that she notices these things, like these plants don't speak the way they do when they're on their native soil.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we kind of we see her enjoying her freedom again pretty quickly when she gets on the island before she starts overthinking it. And, you know, like she's giddy with, like, I get to play with my plants again. I have my lion again. I get to go out on these nighttime hikes to see herbs in their peak potency. But yeah, she eventually gets really, really into her head again. So it's a weird jump around that, like, it's mostly because of what Daedalus says. That whole, like, even a golden cage is still a cage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, it's almost like she doesn't want to let herself enjoy her freedom too much.
To me, I saw this as she doesn't want to think about her sister as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about how a golden cage is still a cage, she would have to acknowledge that her sister's in a cage. And she's not happy. And she doesn't want to think about her like that. And so she keeps doing all these things to distract her, trying to anyway, from that. But that's basically what she's doing through this whole chapter is she's asking Hermes about what her sister's doing. And she is thinking about the thing that's like the things that she knows is true, like coming into her head, but just refusing to think about it because she would rather think about her sister as like this unfeeling monster who doesn't care about anyone or anything than to actually think about the fact that her sister is, she knows for a fact now that she saw her there. She knows that her sister is trapped in a horrible situation. And so she can't just like ignore that anymore or tell herself that her sister enjoys what she's doing or whatever, because she knows that she doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no way that she could think that after seeing her there. And instead of like actually letting herself think about it, she just obsesses about little things. Like one of my favorite little like lines from this last chapter was like, she says she's doing something and she's like, I don't even know why I'm doing it. And I'm like, because of your sister.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're trying to convince yourself that you're not like your sister when you are.
Yeah.
And so you would literally rather do anything in the world than just to actually admit what's actually going on in your brain. You won't even admit it to yourself.
Yeah.
But that's what you're doing.
Let's see. So, one thing we find out in this chapter is she basically made it so that all of the animals that she has in her vicinity, they don't attack each other. I thought that was an interesting use of her magic. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like it's my law that animals bear each other's existence basically when they're
Mm-hmm.
around each other. Um, let's see. Says each night she went out to dig for herbs and roots. Um, After dinner, she sat at Daedalus's loom, and she remarks at how this loom is built because it lasts for many, many generations after Daedalus, and it functions different than a loom. From the way that she describes it, like it sounds like looms back then were woven from the bot, or like you weave down and then like you push the stuff up. It's hard to explain. And hers, it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like it's going down and then you push them to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it turns out to be a much more satisfying way of weaving, and she starts realizing this is a little like spell work, and this just made me think of how many people compare like witchcraft to knitting and crocheting these days. A lot of times artwork just feels like that. The idea that you can create this creative force, it does feel like magic, and
It
it
is
just got me
magic.
to thinking like this is probably where just the concept of magic in general came from, is like
Mm-hmm.
wow, humans created stuff out of all of these little things.
It is magic,
Yeah.
especially because when you're like really artistic or creative or whatever, it just comes out of nowhere. Like
Yeah.
we usually talk about Percy Jackson, like the idea that Rick Riordan's son
Hmm.
was struggling with school because he had ADHD and dyslexia and couldn't concentrate, and he made up an entire bedtime story on the spot using Greek mythology just to make his son happy. Like that's just like just pure creativity that you could just make something that he could make something up like that. That was good enough that his son told him to that you should write that in a book, and he was like, okay.
Yeah.
But like that sort of thing, like it's just pure creativity. Or like when you look at something and you're like, how can I do that? Like, I like doing painting stuff, but it's a very like it's something like that where like you just like see something somewhere and you're like, what if I do this random thing? What would
Yeah.
that make happen? And you don't know, but when you do it, it just like works out and looks really good. And people are always like, how did you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I just like kind of did it. I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing when I did it. It just happened that way. But that is like a magical thing that you just kind of, you're not really thinking about it. It just
Hmm.
kind of happens, or in one way or another.
Yeah. So this is where she gets kind of into her overthinking, and it's her having an argument with essentially Pasiphae's voice in her head.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so she says, I could hear her mink voice as if she stood before me. Um, she says, or like Pasiphae's voice tells her, it was in defiance of our father, in defiance of those who slighted you, that you basically learned your powers. And Cersei's like, no, it was out of love. I loved Glaucus. And she's like, nope, that's not true. Um,
That is not true.
yeah,
She didn't even know who Glaucus was.
yeah. The other thing that this like voice of Pasiphae suggests to her, which I thought was kind of interesting, was they stopped up our mother's womb, so don't you think these powers somewhat come from her? And we had read in the early chapters that Cersei avoided her mom. She didn't like her mom. Her mom was a bitch to her, so she just kind of like stayed away from her.
Mm-hmm.
But it made me start to wonder if like her staying away was yet another way, or yet another thing that stood in the way of her learning her true power quicker, because all of
Mm-hmm.
the other siblings came to their power easier. And I had made the connection like Cersei hadn't really been outside of Helios's palace or any of the sacred places to the gods before that, so like that seems to be why. But it, what if also was her staying away from her mom despite how horrible her mom was?
Mm-hmm.
um let's see. So this is also the part where I'm sure you got a little frustrated with her. So she starts wondering what would have been like if like my sister had been an actual sister, kind of. She says, I tried to imagine it, our heads bent together over herbs, her laughing as she devised some cleverness. I wished then, oh, a dozen impossible things, that I had known sooner what she was, that we had grown up somewhere other than those glittering halls. I could have blunted her poisoned, drawn her from her abusers, taught her how to gather the best herbs. And then she hears Pasiphae's voice. Ha, I will take no lessons from fools like you. You are weak and blind, and it is worse because you choose it. You will be sorry in the end. And so she just kind of argues with herself in her brain. I'm not weak, and I will never be sorry not to be like you. Do you hear? There was no answer. Only thing eating my words was air. Yeah.
I don't know what to say. Um,
Yeah.
it's just she's literally like turning her sister into somebody else inside her own head
Yeah.
instead of just admitting that, like, yeah, um, all of that stuff was happening all that time and I didn't notice. And I didn't even get close to noticing because I was just so sure that she was doing better than me. Um, or that being like picked by our parents would be like, she was like knowing that her parents were bad people, but then at the same time would think that her siblings being picked by them meant that they had a better time, when in reality it just meant that they were around their parents more when they were bad people.
Hmm.
And so, like, being around them more isn't a good thing. They don't treat you nicer if you're around more, you just get treated worse more often.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Um, so this next part is where the line comes from that you mentioned earlier. I no longer thought that Hermes had conspired with Pasiphae. It was only his nature to vaunt his knowledge and laugh at what others did not know. And like that sounds so Gemini. I mean, so Mercury slash Hermes is kind of the template for Gemini men, and this felt very much like this is a Gemini man. And
Mm-hmm.
she's slowly starting to get the ick from him, which I don't know, I'm a little relieved. Like, I'm glad their situationship is kind of ending. Um, what she says is, one moment I would be laughing, and the next his jests turned sour in my throat. When his hands reached for me, I felt a strange dislocation. They were perfect and unscarred. My ambivalence, of course, only encouraged him. Any challenge was a game, any game a pleasure. If I had left him, he would have been gone, yet my revulsion brought him back and back. He pressed so hard to wrap me up, bringing gifts and news, unfolding the whole tale of the Minotaur without my asking. Um, so, like, I don't know. I see that as like she's only passively participating in this situationship at this point. It's kind of for her just like I'm doing this just to feel something at this point.
Mm-hmm. And either way, I don't exactly like the lack of consent.
It's yeah, there's it's not enthusiastic anymore to say the
Mm-mm.
least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just,
After I had sailed away, he said, Minos and Pasiphae's eldest um, Androeus had visited the mainland and been killed near Athens. By then, the people of Crete were restive at having to lose their sons and daughters every harvest and were threatening revolt. Minos seized his opportunity. He demanded as payment for his son that the Athenian king send 7 youths and 7 maids to feed the monster, or else Crete's mighty navy would bring war. The frightened king agreed, and one of the youths chosen was his own child, Theseus. Theseus being the king of the Athenian
mm-hmm.
king, or sorry, the son of the Athenian king. Um, the prince was the mortal I had seen in the mountain pool, but my vision had not told me all. He might have died if not the Princess Ariadne. She fell in love with him, and to save his life, smuggled him a sword and taught him the way through the labyrinth, which she had learned from Daedalus himself. Yet when he came out from that maze with his hands covered in monster blood, she had wept, and not for joy. So Ariadne told Theseus how to survive, despite the fact that she did love her brother, the Minotaur, which, like, Hermes almost tells her in a joking way of, like, can you believe that little girl used to go and talk to the Minotaur in a sweet voice and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's really sad to think of Ariadne like being the only person trying to humanize this monster.
Well, yeah, especially because most of the time he was basically human. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't a cannibal or whatever, except for like that one time of the year. The rest of the year, he was a normal, basically as normal as you could be. Maybe he didn't talk. Um, I just don't like to think about the like comparison you could make with something like that with nonverbal autistic people. But he didn't talk. But other than that, he was um, fine. But they just like kept him down there trapped anyway, and then used the one time of the year when he was super violent to like justify doing that all the time. When the all those other times he was fine, he could have been around everybody and living a somewhat okay life.
Hmm.
And it's also one of those things of maybe if they let him do that, the time during like the harvest wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah.
Um, but they didn't even like try.
Yeah. Well, and we do find out Ariadne got accidentally attacked once. So that was probably her trying to test, like, can I go down there during harvest time?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, she does get a piece of her shoulder bitten into, but Daedalus is the one who, like, helps her heal from that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, so Circe asks, was she punished for helping Theseus? And Hermes tells her no, she fled with him after the creature was dead. Theseus would have married her, but my brother decided he wanted her for himself. You know how he loves the ones with light feet. He told Theseus to leave her on an island and he would come and claim her. Um, he came too late. She had fallen asleep and Artemis had killed her. Okay, I'll break this into two parts. There is the Dionysus part, and this I've talked
Mm-hmm.
it about in Percy Jackson stuff because there are two versions. There's the version where Theseus just leaves Ariadne behind of his own accord, and there's the version where Dionysus like asks him, "Can you leave this girl behind because I want her?" And Rick does choose the version where Theseus leaves her behind because he does it in a book where he's making a point about heroes and he uses it as character motivation for his Dionysus to hate heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in this one, we're going with the version of Dionysus asked for that, and then it led to her downfall. Now, I could only find one piece of source material, so if someone else knows different, you can tell me otherwise. It's a throwaway line in the Odyssey where they mention Ariadne was left behind and then she was killed by Artemis.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really give a good explanation for why. It's just like, yeah, she was killed by Artemis. And I mean, Circe even calls out the fact that this doesn't make sense. And so Hermes says, I couldn't get a straight answer out of Artemis. You know how ill-tempered she is, some incomprehensible slight. Um, I mean, Artemis and Apollo are kind of the most known for cursing people, I would say. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm one of those people that headcanon wise, all of these myths where Artemis wants to take a young girl don't make sense to me. And
Mm-hmm.
so her switching out the girl at the last second makes like when it comes to Iphigenia, Agamemnon's daughter that gets sacrificed on the way to Troy, for example. That one I do think it makes most sense the versions where she switched out for a doe at the last second.
Mm-hmm.
But with this one, the fact that it's only in one piece of source material and Madeline chose to include it, it's just like, again, like going back to her point of this world is not a fun and fair place for little girls.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, so he sees Circe getting sad in this moment and he says, come, if you cry every time some mortal dies, you'll drown in a month. And she just tells him, get out. Which I was like, yes, girlie, stand up. Um, so let's see. This next paragraph kind of just goes back to her point here. Icarus, Daedalus, Ariadne, all gone to those dark fields where hands worked nothing but air, where feet no more touched the earth. If I had been there, I thought, but what would it have changed? It was true what Hermes said. Every moment mortals died by shipwreck and sword, by wild beast and wild men, by illness, neglect, and age. It was their fate, as Prometheus had told me. The story that they all shared, no matter how vivid they were in life, no matter how brilliant, no matter the wonders they had made, they came to dust and smoke. Meanwhile, every petty and useless god would go on sucking down the bright air until the stars went dark. So, like, the fact that all of these people she just cared about died in her eyes in such like thankless and nonsensical ways, it adds to this bitterness she has after this trip.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she asks Hermes then, what came of my sister after the Minotaur's death? He says, she went mad. She wears nothing but black now in mourning. Um, and Circe replies, don't be mad. Don't be a fool. She is only mad if it suits her. She's said to have cursed Theseus, and he is plagued and plagued since. Did you hear how his father died? She thinks I didn't care how she died. Let's see, how, I wanted to hear of my sister. Hermes must have been laughing as he fed me tale after tale, how she had forbidden Minos from her bed, and how her only joy was her youngest daughter, Phaedra, and she was haunting the slopes of Mount Dicte, digging up the whole mountain, searching out new poisons. I hoarded every tidbit like a dragon guards its treasure. I was looking for something, I realized, though I cannot say what. Mention of Phaedra is interesting here, and I don't know if Madeline will bring this one back up because it's not really central to Circe herself. Phaedra you probably know of just a little bit because Hippolytus is like the one ace arrow myth that people
Mm-hmm.
talk about. Phaedra's his mother or his stepmother, and so basically the the way that source material describes it is Phaedra is supposed to be a continuation of this curse on Pasiphae. So her favoring her here is kind of Madeline's nod to that if she doesn't come up, I think.
Okay. Let's
Um,
let. But yeah, that's the line that I thought where she was like, I'm doing these things. I don't even know why I'm doing them.
yeah,
Like, because you're desperately trying to hang on to this childlike idea you had of your sister.
yes,
That's really what it is. Like, she doesn't like Hermes anymore because she can see that he's just like a perfect god. She doesn't like the stuff that Hermes was saying about what was happening to other people when before she didn't care. It's because she like had that I don't know the right word, but she just had that like illusion, I guess, like ruined.
hmm,
And she doesn't want it to be ruined, but it has been, and she's been trying to like get it back,
yeah,
basically. But once you like know something like that, you can't just like go back to how it used to be. Um, but she just like doesn't want to admit it, and it's really frustrating to read her do this stuff and just like, yeah, your sister is your sister. Are you gonna like realize that before you do something stupid
yeah,
or something, whatever it is? Like, you're not actually mad at Hermes, you're mad at the gods because of what they do to everybody.
yeah. Well, she uses the witchcraft that Pasiphae put on Minos as kind of her. When she finds out about that piece from Hermes, she's like, "This is my final straw. This is why I'm not like you bitches." Like, and she. This is where we get that mythology piece of Pasiphae's magic was, I'm going to turn Minos' seed into scorpions and snakes, and then it'll bite any girl from the inside. Um, and this is where we get the line, 100 girls, Pasiphae had said. Anyone whose fathers would not dare raise a fuss against the king, all extinguished for nothing but petty pleasure and revenge. Um, so Yeah, again, very much like I'm nothing like these people. They're all disgusting because at some point you have to like Minos chose to kept doing what he was doing. There's no other way to say that. Like at some point he had to have seen the pattern and been like, I don't care, you know?
Well, yeah, and this part made me really not happy with Cersei because I was like, you are acting like your sister
Right.
because she's in the way that she wouldn't be happy with because she's in there thinking about these girls that are being raped and she has no sympathy for them at all.
Yeah.
She's just thinking about them as an afterthought to make herself feel better about herself.
Hmm.
She's like, "Oh, well those girls are getting raped by this guy and then dying, but I'm not like that because the reason why those girls are dying is because of my sister." No, the reason why those girls are dying is because Minos is a fucking freak. It's
Yeah.
not because of your sister. Like she may have put that on him, but like why do you think she did that? Like because he's a freak and it
Yeah.
needs to somebody needs to cut it off, but they won't do that, and so she does that instead, which honestly is more fun.
Yeah.
If it wasn't hurting innocent people, but she's sitting there just thinking about these girls. She doesn't even acknowledge the fact that they're being raped, that there's no way that they could actually want this stuff to happen, and then they're dying because of it. She's just talking about them in such like, oh, whatever. Like, yeah, those girls that don't matter die because my sister wants to play with them. I'm nothing like her. And I'm like, you're talking about them like they're less than human.
Hmm.
Like, how are you different than your sister right now? You're talking about these other people that are around her, and you're also talking about her as if she's not a real person. You're being exactly like her, but you don't see it when it's you
Hmm.
because you don't think that you could be like that, but you are acting like that. You're talking about like, Daedalus dying or something or whatever happens with Ariadne and these people, and you're just talking like Hermes is telling you about these things as if it's like gossip. Like you just like don't care.
Yeah.
It's just like there isn't that like care for them. You're just talking about them. And the only reason you're asking about it is because you want to know if your sister is more unhappy than you are.
Pretty much.
And that's literally it. Like wanting to know like if her sister's still unhappy, and then when she finds out that she is, like even her sister mourning is like, oh, she couldn't really be mourning because she can't actually have feelings. And it's like, what if she is?
Yeah.
Like what if she actually just is? And it's like, what are you doing? You're doing the same stuff that you say that people do to you to somebody else. You could stop anytime. Like you can stop anytime now, and it's just this is the stuff that happens. Like your sister told you what she did, and your response was to dehumanize her some more. And then
Hmm.
because of how much time passes, you spend the next thousands of years doing the same thing with other people too, just
Yeah.
convincing yourself of that over and over again instead of just believing, like acknowledging what's actually happening, that she's hurt by the things that you're hurt by too. Wouldn't that be better?
Yeah, it'd be better to actually have that sisterly relationship. I mean, this is something we've talked about before, like just privately, is because we've both had situations where people ended friendships with us without any confrontation. And, like, in a way, confrontation can be a way to get more vulnerable and get to a new phase of a relationship with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Pasiphae being open to saying like the nasty parts of being in a dysfunctional family out loud was in a way her kind of opening the door for them to have some sort of discussion that led to closeness. And while she did scream get out at the very end, there definitely was an opportunity for Cersei to keep trying.
Yeah. And like she also yelled get out because of how like Cersei didn't really
React.
respond the way
Yeah.
that you would want like in any way in that situation. So she was like get away from me. I That's understandable. But um I don't know. I just we talked about talking about like how people talk about cutting off family members online. We never actually did that. We could do that whenever we want. Um but I just say like this whole situation, this is what it's actually like. And like the internet is really into talking about why you cut people off or whatever, but they don't talk about like the other parts or what have you. Like you can't cut everybody out necessarily.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess you could, but that would be sad. I was sad when I did that for a couple years. Um, but it's like a thing of like Cersei being like, well, like Pasiphae hurt me in the past, and it's like, yeah, that's what it's like when you're in a family that's run by abusive people. You're gonna hurt each other because you're in an abusive situation, and it's the only way they know how to survive. If
Yeah.
you decide not to talk to anyone because they hurt you in the past when you're in a family like this, you will talk to nobody. Like if that was true, I never would have talked to anybody in my family.
Yeah.
Um, After like 2019, I would have just never spoken to any of them again, and like that would be stupid. um,
Yeah.
because there all these people wanted to help. Like my sister did. My A couple of my aunts and uncles from both sides of my family popped up, and like I ignored them for my an aunt on both sides of the family. They would send me like emails. They would text message me sometimes for like 2 years, and I never responded to them the entire time. I told myself that I would, but I never responded to them for at least a year. It was more like 2 years, really. And then finally, in like 2021, I started talking to both of them after ignoring them since 2018. And I started like seeing them again, and then started seeing my sister a little bit more, and then eventually like started talking to my mom again in like 2023. But like, if I was not going to talk to anybody just because they hurt me, even if I acknowledge also that they were also hurt,
Hmm.
then I would like not have any of these nice things in my life. Like those people
Yeah.
popped up and wanted to help me, and they wanted to like support me and all this kind of stuff. All those years they wanted to do that. Um, like even when my mom came over and we talked for the first time in like 5 years, the only thing she said was like, I just want you to know that I love you, and I would do anything that you want to help make you be happy for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And then I cried for like 3 hours after but that's what she said. She said like, I just want to do anything that I can so that you will be happy for the rest of your life. And I was like, oh my god. Like that's why I get mad at like Cersei in this book, because her sister like, was able to put it out there for her. That takes a lot of effort
Yeah.
to do that. I actually know what that's like. It's really hard. It's really, really hard. It's really hard to do that, to tell people stuff like that is going to make them upset, that's going to change the entire way that they view the rest of the world. It's really hard. And I did that like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 times in like 6 months. It's really, really hard to do that kind of thing, knowing how much it's going to affect the other person. And it's like, it's an amazing gift to have somebody do that with you, and be able to like, put themselves out there like that. Like it's very difficult. And her sister did that, and she just like ignored it, and has been trying to basically dissociate almost since then, to be like, no, but I hate my sister. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
Like, why do you hate her right now? Like, my sister didn't do that with me. She felt really bad. Like, when she found out what was going on, she felt really bad. Like, she felt really guilty. Like, yeah, we went back and forth some, because that's not hard. That's not easy to figure out, especially because in my case, the person that did it had been dead for 4 years. So they couldn't go back and like, confront him about it. Like she used to tell me that she was like afraid that he would somehow like see her thinking this stuff about him, and like do something to her or judge her or something from like heaven. If like
Yeah.
that gives you an idea of how controlling and scary my dad was. My sister was afraid to be mad at him after he was dead for 4 years, because she was afraid that he would see her feeling that way about him.
Yeah.
And so it's like yeah, like she was really upset. My mom was really upset for a long time. Still is, granted, but like, I mean, when we weren't talking, they like went through it. I know they were going through it the same way that I was. I couldn't like handle anybody else's, because I was going through it too much, that I couldn't even think about what other people were going through at the same time as me. But I knew that they were, and I could see how that affected them.
Yeah.
And so to see like Cersei like hear her sister say something like that and just move on and try to just move on and go back to her life as if it never happened, that she wasn't affected by it, and never like wanted to go back to like talk to her again or like see her again or like do anything with her again, and then is like talking about how, oh, she could never possibly mourn her son dying, which does make me think that she might have been enchanted or something. But it's just like all of this stuff is happening and she can't, I don't know, she just can't admit it and see it. And it's like this is like I don't know if people, honestly don't know what people think happen when you try to like heal, I guess, for lack of, I kind of hate the word heal because of how life coaches use it, but whatever.
Yeah.
Intergenerational trauma. But this is what actual intergenerational trauma healing whatever is actually like. Like, yeah, you have to talk to people that hurt you a lot, but you're talking to them as if in a completely different way. You're able to just like be yourself and they're able to be more themselves instead of having to pretend like things that are happening are not happening in both of your lives. And so it's a really nice thing. It's like a completely new relationship. Like, and like, yeah, you have like the memories that you had from before, but the relationship is completely different. Like my sister was, she sent me like a Facebook memory of when we went to a concert together in like 2011. And she
Hmm.
was like, how is that 14 years ago? And that was 3 years before my dad died. And she would, and I was like, I don't know. And I remember that and I said to her, like, we were babies then. And she's like, yeah. And I felt like I was really old at the time. And I was like, I know, I remember. I felt like that too. I was like 26, like 26, 27. We felt like we were old, but we were so little compared to like how we feel now. But it's just like that kind of stuff. Like we have memories from that time, but the like relationship we have now is really different, and in like a really good way. It's way better than it was then. Like given like an opportunity, literally like on a silver platter,
Hmm.
to do that, and just like ignoring it on purpose and still going on acting like she's the only victim of this family and nobody else is. I just wanted to like start my book on fire because I was just like, what are you doing? You have like a chance to actually fix this stuff. Your sister is offering this to you. She's wanting this from you, and you're just like being like, no, she still hates me because she hates everybody. No, she doesn't. She wouldn't have asked you to come if she really hated you.
Yeah. So Cersei ends this chapter thinking, if I was trapped on an island, at least I did not have to share the world with her, being Pasiphae and her all her kind. I cast them out and I am finished. And so that was kind of her moment of, well, whatever. I'm not like them. I'm gonna forget about them. I'm not gonna care what they think about me anymore.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's all you could say about that.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely parts of this that are relatable to me, at least. Like, I mean, I have rejected my whole mom's side of the family. This is something I don't talk about that much because they're not really a part of my life anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, a lot of it was we don't get along because we're nothing alike, but that's not true. They're still my family. Like there's still certain things that I just can't get away from, like just inherently come from them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
That situation is more about your grandmother anyway.
Yeah, her and her flying monkeys.
Mm-hmm. Like anything you tell them, they're gonna tell her. So that makes it hard to have like a real relationship. Like everything that happened with my family happened because my dad's dead.
Hmm.
And so we had time to like figure all this stuff out after he was gone.
Yeah,
If he was still around, none of these relationships would be possible. And so I can't pretend like that's not true with you either. That's why I
yeah,
just want her to die.
yeah.
Just go.
Who
Bye
knows if it'll
bye.
fix anything for real, though? I
It
think
takes
some of them
like
are
it took a long
just, yeah.
time. Like my dad's been dead for 11 years this year. It took like, 7 years basically until things started getting slowly fixed over the last couple years. But that's a long time. It doesn't just happen overnight, but it does happen
Yeah,
if you try.
yeah.
Um, but they have to be gone first for their like effect to like dissipate a little bit and almost like people to come out of like a fog that they're in and realize like what was going on
Yep.
for all those years once they're not around anymore.
Yeah. So that is the end of what we read for this one. I mean, a lot of the mythology is Madeline putting stuff in between the lines this time. It's not necessarily a huge jump. It's just like she took what little information that there was and either added to it or said, like, there isn't really an explanation for this. Anyway, um, but yeah, we'll be back on Wednesday. I'll let her know I'm logging off. I don't think she'll come back on right away. Um, but yeah, we'll be back on Wednesday.